Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I thought it'd be nice to finally shoot another craft time chat video. And for those of you who are new, back when I first started my channel, I used to do quite a few of these craft time chats, and it was a way that I could shoot a video and talk about some subjects and get some stuff done at the same time. So as a lot of you know, I making skirts all the time, and aprons are the secondary thing, but skirts are the big one. I've always got skirts, either special orders I'm working on or skirts to get up on my store, and they don't stay on the store for very long. And so this is my job. This is my main job right now, is skirt making. And so this is just a great way for me to chat about some things and still stay on the job here to getting these done. I wanted to talk a little bit today about prepping, and are preppers crazy? Well, I feel like I got to go back a little bit, and some of you have been with me long enough that you might have seen some of my other prepping related videos and talked a little bit about what brought me here, but I thought I would go ahead and just do a brief rundown of how I got to where I am today as far as the mentality. And it's a series of events, and a lot of the things that I do now, the self-sufficiency and all that kind of stuff, sewing and crocheting and just all these different things, cooking and baking from scratch, these have been things, some of them go clear back to my mid-teens, some go back farther, some have been newer in the past 20 years, maybe some 10 years, but a lot of that was just me wanting to be more independent. I like the independence of being able to do things for myself. And so that's nothing real new. But when I got more serious into prepping, it was, the main catalyst was starting to read books, some of them actually purely just for enjoyment, such as Michael Crichton's The State of Fear. That was one of my wake-up calls. Here I was just reading a book because I liked Michael Crichton's work, but when I read that, it really opened my eyes to a lot. And anyone who's ever read the book State of Fear will know exactly what I'm talking about. And because even though the book was fictitious, it was based around a lot of fact. And I actually recommend, if you haven't read that book and you enjoy reading, and especially if you like Michael Crichton, go find that book. It's a big one, it's thick. And there's a lot there that's kind of hard to wrap your head around when you're reading it. But anyway, that was one of my first wake-up calls. And then a few other events that happened along the way, such as in 2008, we went through a situation where we, thankfully the only debt we had at that time was the house. But we went through a financial situation that, had we not been mostly debt-free at that time, I'm not sure how we would have made it. That was kind of another wake-up call. And then a couple of years after that, I made the decision that it was time to start learning a little bit more about what was going on in the political realm, especially if I was going to continue voting. I figured I should probably educate myself. And boy, howdy, that was a tough education. There was a lot of things I learned along the way that were pretty painful. And I won't get into the whole political thing here because I try to keep that off my YouTube, but I will say this, it was very shocking and heartbreaking to me to realize how little our voice actually counts when it comes to voting. But what that resulted in, though, was me getting more into learning other things. And it just seemed like I kind of threw myself in head first into learning about so many things, and was just blown away about how everything that's going on in our world all interlinks with each other. What's going on politically, what's going on with our food supply, what's going on with our water, and what's going on in big pharma, and all of it. It was, I think sometimes there comes a point where it's almost like oversaturation, and that's where I was. And then I made the mistake of starting to listen to certain alternative news sources that, I'm not saying it's all bad. There was a lot of things I learned that were pretty interesting and eye-opening. But one thing I realized, that you got to be careful what sources you're going to and how much you really steep yourself into some of that stuff. It's kind of like you don't want to stare into the abyss for too long. Because I found myself becoming very angry and scared all the time, and it was just not a pretty place to be. And I have to admit, we talk about what, our prepper's crazy. Well, at that point in my life, I think I did kind of go through a bit of a crazy period. And I think it tends to happen to a lot of people when they haven't slowly been introduced to this stuff, but they just do what I did and just kind of jump in all the way and just steep themselves in everything that's going on. And then all of a sudden you think everything is a lie and everything is a conspiracy, and there is a balance there. And I had to find that balance, and one of it was turning off certain voices and not listening to them anymore, because I also realized some of these voices, when I heard them saying facts that I actually knew about firsthand, and they weren't relaying the truth on those facts, it made me have to question how much of anything they'd ever said was true. And I was always suspicious there was a lot of exaggeration going on in the first place. So I had to turn off those voices and just start saying, okay, I'm at a point now where at least I believe I'm heading in the right direction and getting things in order the way I think they should be, and getting ourselves prepared for whatever life may throw our way. Because 2008 was a tough situation for us. And we've seen so many other things happen, not just in our own family, but in other people's family, that just make, and around the world, even just here in the United States, all the different natural disasters people have had to go through. And I think it's really silly if we continue to keep saying, oh, it'll never happen here. I think those are famous last words. It'll never happen here. And like, for example, anyone living in our area would be pretty silly to think that they're never going to see any kind of natural disaster when we're overdue for a major earthquake. We've got volcanoes not far from us, and we're not too far from the ocean, so we've got tsunamis to concern ourselves with. Now, I don't live in fear of those things, but those are things that people need to keep in consideration. And no matter where you live on this planet, there is something that you have to consider for your area, something that could happen. And is it crazy to have a little insurance to be ready for those things, at least to the best of your ability, when they happen? Well, I certainly don't think so. Is it crazy to buy car insurance? Is it crazy to buy health insurance? Well, the way I look at it is, I think it's more crazy to be forced to buy car and health insurance rather than just putting a savings account away for these things, than it is to be prepared for whatever life throws your way by being out of debt, being ahead on your bills, having some money put away for whatever happens, having some food. I would say at least a year's worth of food supply on hand and anything, having some backup light sources, some backup cooking sources. And if you're new to my channel, we have a whole series that we've been working on preparedness. And it's still a process for us. I don't think anyone ever arrives at the ultimate place in prepping. I think, and in fact, I think if a person thinks they've arrived, then they've stopped learning and stopped, doing what they can to be ready. But the sad thing is in our society, though we see more and more people kind of starting to wake up and realizing the importance of having some food and water put away and different things like that, we still see this kind of mentality of American exceptionalism and how, well, why should I do that? What does it matter if I prepare? Because if it's the end of the world, then it won't matter. That's really pretty silly, because you look at it this way: a job loss may not be the end of the world. It may be the end of the world as you know it. And suddenly your life has changed. A catastrophic accident that happens just to you that causes you to be unable to work. And now what are you going to do? Are you prepared? Are you out of debt? Do you have provisions put away for yourself and your family in case you don't have an income coming in? I mean, that's not the end of the entire world. You're still alive, so is it crazy to have that insurance that at least that will just get you by until things work out in your favor, if they ever do? And when you look around the United States and you see the constant things that are happening, and we're not even just talking about the bigger events like hurricanes. Look at things like contaminated water supplies. And then all of a sudden the stores are being rushed and cleared out of any type of, any water is gone within an hour of an event like that out of every single store in the area. And then the next things to go are the soda or any juices or anything else that's drinkable. When people don't have a water source, they're going to go down there, and it's always that person first. Okay, it's highly unlikely people are going to be stocking up on water so that they can hand it out to their neighbors. So you can't assume that somebody else is going to take care of you. There's a myriad of things that could happen, a myriad of things. And what I think is truly crazy is not the person that's putting away, even for the things that I find a little far-fetched. I mean, there are some things out there I think are a little bit silly, that a person can go a little bit too far. But on the other hand, each person has to decide what's best for them, and maybe for those people that's what is best for them because of where they live, because of maybe people that they have to deal with or interact with. You got to take all these things into consideration. And again, I think it's far more crazy to just assume that nothing's ever going to happen, or that somebody else is going to take care of you in a whatever kind of grid down life-changing event's going to happen to you. That's what's crazy to me. Now I want to go back and talk a little bit about that period of time that most of us go through when we're first learning about all these things and realizing the importance of getting ourselves in a better situation. I think a good majority of the people do, not everyone, but I think there's a lot of people who are like me and just decided to really start learning and found themselves just constantly in this. Well, it's interesting because there's certain higher powers, earthly powers, that constantly keep us in a state of fear to control us. But then what we do is we decide we're going to start learning truth. And when we start learning that truth, we often find ourselves following other sources that are keeping us in a state of fear from another angle. And usually anybody that's keeping you in a state of fear is manipulating you for the sake of money. And so you got to keep that in mind. I don't care if it's doctors, teachers, alternative news sources, or mainstream news, or whatever. It really doesn't matter. So you have to realize, okay, if you're in the middle of that period of time, which the average of that period of time of that freaking out, you know, the conspiracy theorist, prepper freaking out, we're all gonna die or whatever. I'm not trying to belittle it, but it is this period of time we all tend to go through that we do get a little bit crazy. And we'll have friends and family that will stop talking to us during that time. And when we have that, we go through that period of time, which is an average of 6 months to 2 years. I think right around 18 months is probably the key number there. And all of a sudden you realize that, wow, I've kind of gone off the deep end here, and now I went from listening to these guys to listening to these guys. So now let's bring it back. Let's kind of bring it all back. I'm going to choose to stop living in fear, but I'm also going to choose to be responsible and take care of myself and my family and our futures to the best of my abilities. And then to those who are believers, then obviously we need to trust God with whatever we can't control, whatever is totally out of our hands. Now, and on that note, while I'm there talking about believers, there are a lot of people out there that choose not to prep, that call themselves Christians, and they want to lean heavily on the scriptures in the New Testament, such as when Jesus was talking about the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, and how they don't worry about what's to come, and the Heavenly Father takes care of them. Well, this is true. This is true. And I'm certainly not going to deny that. But that does not, some people seem to take that as a license to just go ahead and take their money and live their life however they want, you know, and not see to the future of themselves and their families. You know, it says, care not for tomorrow, for the morrow will take care of itself. It doesn't say stop doing what you can to prepare yourself for the winter when it comes. So consider, because there's other scriptures all throughout both Old and New Testament that talk about being ready for different events. And there were certain situations where God called people to be ready. Look at Noah, look at Joseph, and the list goes on and on. And then we've got verses in Proverbs. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. And, you know, she was putting up meat in the summertime to get her through the winter. And so, how do we, you know, we can't take a certain scripture over here and then try to put that as a blanket scripture for every aspect of our lives. We have to read things in context and understand it all. God doesn't want us to be lazy, and He doesn't want us to just, though He wants us to trust in Him, He doesn't want us to just sit back and expect Him to just, you know, serve us on a silver platter for the rest of our lives. We were also told that we needed to work. And for our situation, what we're doing, just like me making these skirts, this is me not only having the opportunity to bless somebody with something that I feel is my personal expression and work of art, but it's also an income for us to help get us through this rough time that we're currently going through. And I'm not going to go into detail on that. It's been a long, ongoing thing. And had we not already been on this road to preparedness and also learning skills all along the way while we're doing it, I'm not sure where we'd be right now, but we're doing fine. It's not always easy, but we're doing fine. So don't worry about us. Just keep us in your prayers as we go through this. I don't think it'll last forever, but it has been going on for quite a while. But anyway, and I will say this, having a good, strong marriage is also incredibly important. And I think that's another topic that Mr. Rain and I would like to talk about. We were actually going to do it a year or so ago, but then several other channels started doing that. And so we thought, we'll put it off so it doesn't look like we're trying to steal their thunder or copy them or something. But I will say this, that if you're married, I think one important prepper aspect is making sure that your marriage is strong. Because if you don't have full trust in your spouse, and they don't have full trust in you, when hard times come, it's going to be very, very difficult. And if you're to the point where you have a good, strong marriage and you're working as a team like you're supposed to be doing, then you will be able to get through it together because you're working for the same end. And that's a whole nother topic. And I may talk on this topic alone, but I'd also like to do one with Mr. Rain, just basically giving some marriage tips. But I would also like to do like a woman to woman kind of thing at some point, and tips on how you get to that point. You know, yes, we've been married for over 28 years, and we've been through some tough things along the way, but we managed to take those tough things and grow from them and become stronger as a result. I wanted to ask some questions of you guys, and that is, if you're into prepping, homesteading, self-sufficiency, whatever it is you want to call yourself, because prepping's been given kind of a bad name these days, thanks to certain TV shows, but I don't mind saying it anymore because that's what I'm doing. I'm prepping for hard times. And so if you're into that, what was the catalyst that got you there? What were the routes that you took? How did you start out? Did you start out with stocking up on food, or did you start out with a garden? For us, we started stocking up on some food, but mostly thought it was more important to get into growing a garden and learning about, growing our own food. But we talk about that in our food storage video, and I'll go ahead and link to that right up here. And what are some other things that you do or did to get started? And also, did you go through a crazy period? Did you go through that time where it just seemed like you were overwhelmed with how many different things were going on in the world, and realizing that you needed to take control of your own life, which that's actually not crazy at all, but you know what I mean, that crazy period where you're kind of freaking out and scared and angry all at the same time. And how long did it last for you? And you can also share with us your thoughts on just prepping in general. Do you think that you can reach a point where you're there? Or do you think it's a constant process of growing and learning and bettering yourself? And what are some other things that you would recommend to others who are getting started out on this road and considering walking this road? And what advice would you give them along the way? I know that's a lot of stuff, but if you're willing to share with you don't have to answer all of those questions, but I think there's so much that many can learn. Those who are it seems to me there's a group of people out there that are almost afraid to get into prepping. Maybe they're afraid of being called crazy. Maybe they're afraid of taking the space and the time and the money to do it. Maybe they feel like it's a waste of time. But what would you say to those people? To encourage them, not berate them, but to encourage them to consider making these choices to get themselves in a better situation. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't think it was really a teaching video. I'm just sort of sharing with you some thoughts, and mostly looking for you to share with me your thoughts on the matter. So thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.